Hi everyone, this is Stefan Sturm from IREB. I'm the managing director, and I'm stopping the introduction because it already appears that we already got this same delay problem as we had in some of the past roundtables. No clue why. Well, welcome to our roundtable today, the future of requirements engineering. The topic is, as usual in these days, around AI. How will AI influence the way we are doing requirements engineering? How will AI change the role of requirements engineering? And I'm very happy to have two experts in the call today. We do have, now back to my other screen, Patrick Medic from Fraunhofer IESE. He will introduce himself later. And then we have Kevin Plesner from MetaFinanz. These are our two panelists, and I'm very curious about the discussion and handing over to Patrick for the introduction. Patrick, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. I'm happy to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. And into this discussion, I want to bring my own expertise and my background. I'm coming from Fraunhofer IESE. As you said, I'm heading the department that is called Digital Innovation Design. And usually we say we are around in the early phases of software engineering. And this also describes my work. So I'm doing project leads, I'm doing requirements work, I'm doing a bit of UX work, I'm building prototypes, little bit of coding there, and doing all of that with a strong focus on digital innovation. So trying to find out how we can help our business partners creating new and interesting digital innovation that will bring them forward in their own markets. And based on that, I'm absolutely sure that when we shape digital innovation, we can solve more or less all the problems that we are facing. And it's just to us to make it in a really clever way. And to just do it. And maybe the AI revolution, whatever we want to call that thing that we right now experience, is just, again, something that will help us to make that digital transformation better. Yeah, and today I'm joined by Kevin. And maybe, Kevin, you want to introduce yourself as well.
Sorry if I sneak in, because what I forgot is we will record this session. So please be aware that there is a recording ongoing, and we will share the recording afterwards on YouTube. Of course, it is live streamed as well on YouTube and on LinkedIn, but the recording is already running. So sorry for jumping in. Kevin, now you please.
Stefan, of course, I consent to the recording.
Okay,
but yeah, thanks. So hello, everybody. My name is Kevin. I'm from Munich and I'm working at MetaFinanz. We are a consulting firm specialized in IT and management consulting. And I myself, and we as a company ourselves, we took on the challenge to really dig deep into the topic of AI transformation and how to solve problems in the field of IT and management in terms of AI transformation. So I've been involved in a lot of very broad topics regarding AI transformation on how to holistically transform companies in terms of AI, but also more specifically, my expertise is focused on the innovation of use cases, right? So we have IT, we have people empowerment, and we have data. These are the topics that I'm mostly concerned with. And I think in terms of this discussion, the future of the requirements engineer, I think I can share with you a method, a concept that we developed. We broadly are speaking of the future employee, but we will apply this framework, let's say it like this, on how to transform IT, people, and data in the future requirements engineer context. So I'm happy to be here. And yeah, let's see what the future brings in terms of AI transformation. I'm personally an optimist in terms of AI transformation, but more to that in a minute.
So, switching to that screen, Kevin, I believe that we start with the short presentation. Yes. You have prepared a few slides, so I will bring you back on screen, and please share your screen for the presentation.
I will, Stefan. Thank you. All right, I'm sharing my screen. Great. Is there a possibility to see myself on the right-hand side?
Just give me a second.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So yeah, just share your screen again, please. I'm not sure what this thing is again
right,
doing.
so
I just need to click it on, I believe. Give me a second. Here
okay,
we
no,
go.
I think we're
Sorry
fine.
about that.
Okay, great. So as we are good to go, we can start. So you can see here, the future requirements engineer is the topic today. Let's go into it. I just have a few slides so you get an understanding of the introduction that I just had, and I think it will set the context of the discussion that we will go into with Patrick a little bit more. So yeah, we from MetaFinanz, we were thinking about on how we can generate productive use case. I think this was, in terms of the introduction of very user-friendly AI solutions, a very big topic, right? Everybody was hyped. Everybody was thinking they found the new thing. But as time has progressed, we found out that many use cases sound good in theory and maybe provide some efficiency, but aren't really effective, right? So we've created this method. It's basically a ideation method, let's say it like this, called Future Employee, that is aiming to create use cases that are effective in the end. And basically, we do this in 5 steps. So first, we have to recognize that AI transformation is not a typical introduction of a new technology, right? There's a paradigm shift that has to happen when we talk about AI transformation, right? So AI transformation or ideation of use cases, if you start to ideate very abstract, right? So if you think about solutions, for example, if I want to automate my recruiting process, you will inherit biases, right? For example, from your role, from your process that you're currently in, and you will treat AI as a simple technological evolution of the current process. But AI is more than that. If you think about what AI actually is and compare it with our natural intelligence, right? So natural intelligence is used in any step of any type of knowledge work, from the simple grammar check until strategic decisions. AI can inform any type of task, any type of activity that we are performing on the day-to-day. Therefore, we need a shift, and we need to accept that AI transformation is a restructuring of knowledge work itself. So what we do next, if we accept that we need to restructure knowledge work itself, we need to decompose our work, our knowledge work, in a very granular way. And to make this holistically, to really decompose everything, human roles, IT processes, and the business context, we take a look at tasks, because tasks are a really good entry point to break down everything in a very fine, granular way. The key here is to capture the tasks continuously, and this will create a transparency on what actually happens in the work. These decomposed tasks, right? So if we now have our knowledge landscape, has to then be structured in a logical way. So we have to think about how we can structure organizational knowledge and how we can then classify our tasks that we, let's say, mind in a way that we can grasp it, and we can then make decisions on how to treat these tasks. I'm sorry for this animations. However, after we have a classification knowledge, logic, which I will share in a second, we need to have some sort of decision system for then to decide which tasks will be performed by AI and which tasks will be performed by human. And with that, we kind of compose again together all of the tasks to new roles and to new processes. And AI plus the new roles is basically the use case that we were talking. So you saw we have a paradigm shift. We decomposed everything to tasks. We put on a classification system, put everything back together in place, and now we have use cases again. Now let's take a quick look into the classification system that I just described. So this is a very hard question on what company knowledge actually is, what knowledge actually is. There are many different types of representation on how knowledge could be structured. We take as this pyramid. It's a so-called knowledge hierarchy. by Russell Ackoff, right? So you can see from the bottom to the top, you have different type of levels of knowledge nuggets. For example, on the bottom, you can see the raw data, right, that comes in. This is a type of data that is very explicit, so easily documentable. In the context of the requirements engineer, you have, for example, error logs or user feedback as typical data nuggets. If you then ascend the knowledge hierarchy, you can see that the information or the knowledge piece gets more and more tacit. That means it depends, for example, more on the experience of a requirements engineer. With that, the information level would be, for example, a structured observation. In the terms of requirements engineer, it could be something like, okay, we can see that there is a lot of failure during the login step. On the knowledge hierarchy dimension, you can see that now we have the why included. So even more tacit knowledge. We're understanding now the factors, what led to the failure. Here, we discovered that it's the two-factor authentication that makes the problems. And on the top, we have the wisdom. We have the wisdom dimension, which, for example, here is the right decision on which type of strategy we use to eliminate this problem, right? For example, are we deciding, in our case here, to simplify security, to add more guidance into the login process, or to keep the strict security despite friction? And this is something that is really hard to document, right? It's really based on the strategy, on experience, and this is how we capture knowledge inside of organizations. What does that mean for our approach? So you can see here now we have some bubbles here on the screen, and these bubbles represent sort of tasks. So everybody in a company, so you can think about this as a set of tasks that you personally perform, right, is performing tasks in such a way. So humans, they are performing tasks basically effectively on each level. AI is performing tasks currently in the year 2026 very effectively on the more lower levels of AI, of the knowledge hierarchy. If you get more and more wisdom-focused tasks, like for example strategy, you might realize that AI is not the best solution. So now we have to decide on what to do with this information, right? So there are two scenarios. There's a pessimistic scenario, let's say like this, for humans, and a optimistic one. Let's take a look on the pessimistic scenario on how the future might look like. So as we have just seen, employee tasks are performed like this. AI tasks are performed effectively on the lower tasks. And what a lot of people imagine the future would look like is something like this. More and more tasks are replaced by AI until a situation where you see that all tasks in a, let's say for an individual or in company or in team, can be performed by AI. And this is the sentiment that a lot of people share. Oh my God, AI will take our jobs. I firmly don't believe that this is the case. At least this is not a vision that leads to good and effective strategies for now. I think this second scenario is a much more realistic one for now, and in my opinion, for the future as well. So you can see now here, this is the now, and I firmly believe that this is the future that is immediate. If in the future it will change, right? I'm open to that, I'm agnostic to that, but I think AI is currently transforming our tasks and pushes it more to the knowledge and wisdom dimensions of the hierarchy. So our tasks are getting more complex, and now it's the task of the future requirements engineer in the context to be the one who is negotiating, the change of our jobs, and especially between humans and AI, right? What tasks are in AI? What tasks are in the human domain? And of course, to close this before I hand back to Patrick, these are two scenarios, right? These are assumptions, but like the creator of the knowledge hierarchy said, the future is dealt better using assumptions than forecasts. A really good interpretation, in my opinion, because it implies that tacit knowledge, so knowledge on experience, wisdom, is more effective than data. And with that, I can hand back to Patrick. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And that was already a very interesting start. And you mentioned a lot of points that I want to talk about with you in a second. But probably we can start also with a few slides from my side. And I'm not seeing them already. Hopefully they will be there soon. But I can, yeah, perfect. I can already start with the one thing that you mentioned, right? You already talked about the efficiency of the AI solutions, and that this is something where we need to have a very, very close look when we talk about what is the right task, what is the right way of bringing together humans and AI, and making sure that we can create something out of that. Because I really think it's super important to bring back in our minds that efficiency and the aim and the goal of automating all that stuff in our lives and in our daily jobs to make sure we get more time out of the day and can do more in fewer hours. This is not always the same as effectiveness. So we do a lot of things and we try out a lot of things when we work with these systems, but not all of the things that we do are really effective in the end. And when we talk about the effect, it's about, do we really make the impact that we want? And this is already something that we can see on a very low level when we look at our own tasks that we try to automate as good as we can. And this is also something that is the same problem when we go on a higher level. So thinking about a team that wants to cooperate and automate, or even thinking about a whole organization that wants to automate business processes and business decisions. And this is actually something that is quite hard. And the nice thing is it has already been hard back in the days. This is not something that is new. And when we think about the future of requirements engineering in terms of AI, I always remind myself that the term AI is quite old. So it's from 1956, from the last year, the last, so not this, whatever. Huh? It's like 70 years ago. And even all the stuff that we see with the current hype and the LLMs, already this is something that is not born like last year. This has been here and around for quite a few years. And we as requirements engineers, we as software engineers, we as the people that are trained in methods, I think we have dealt with that before already. And for me, the most important part is when we think about what can we do with that technology, and to a degree, I would also say, what can we do within that paradigm shift that you mentioned? I think it's very, very important to think about what is that thing that we want to deal with. And here I take it with Alberto, and when he's saying, make sure you're building the right it before you build it right. This is something that has applied before when we talked about digital transformation. And this is something that, in my opinion, also applies when we talk about the AI use cases. So I think it's really important that we understand what we are working with, what is the case, what is the task that is concerned there, what is the business process, what is the business value that we can achieve there, and what is the possible angle that we can tackle that thing, what can we do with the technology that we have, what are the limitations, and then we try to actually bring it into production. And this is something that sounds easy, and I would say this is also something that should sound familiar to requirements engineers, because this is what we have been doing when we talked about requirements and trying to find out what people actually need in businesses. But this is also something that is maybe a bit different when we think about the current AI world. And one thing that is very easy to fall into a trap is it's very easy to be efficient with the AI at the wrong task. So you can get tracked away by using the systems, and even as a team or as a company, using that thing for the wrong task. And it feels like you are efficient and it feels like you are doing the right thing, but actually you're not really creating business value. You're doing something different. And I would say this is super important. It's super easy to produce some output that is good enough, or it feels good enough, without really realizing if you are actually efficient and if you're actually making an impact. And that's the next question. So when we talk about, are we really effective? We need to understand what is our goal. So what is our measurement? Effectiveness on its own says, okay, we are achieving what we want to achieve, and this means we need to understand what we want. That sounds easy, but again, this is what RE is doing, right? We need to understand the business. We need to understand the business processes in the context of the bigger business. We need to understand those tasks and make sure that we understand the goal that we want to achieve. And yeah, this is something that is not really different from before, but maybe this is also somewhat different because right now we're bringing in automation. Kevin already talked about that. He called it a paradigm shift. When we talk about automation, we talk about things like emergent behavior that might be coming up from that system. So probably there are aspects when we talk about requirements engineering that will be different from classical RE, but I'm also pretty convinced that the methods that we learned and the systematic behavior that we learned is maybe also the same that we had before. And what is super interesting, we are changing the software engineering by using AI in our work, while the target that we are applying that to is also changing because now we use the new technology for the software engineering systems that we are building there. And all of this is transforming a lot that is going on. And one thing that I'm observing is we are trying to automate a lot of things. And that AI hype is coming from software engineering people. This is coming from people that are building systems, that are developers. And obviously, the first thing that we try to apply this to is our own system. So we are trying to automate coding. We're trying to automate the creation of software systems. And this is working quite good to some degree already. And I'm pretty sure this will be going forward. And let's say my assumption is right. So there will be a huge part of coding that we can automate. Then we still need to decide what is the right thing that we want to code. What is the right system that we want to create? How should that system work? And this is something that will be still there even if you start automating part of that software engineering process. And let's say we automate how we create a software architecture and abstract away all the technology decisions. And this is something that we can create automatically. We still need to understand the business. We need still to understand the task. What is that thing that we want to automate? So even if there's more and more automation in that software engineering, so we change software engineering with AI, I still think it's important that we as requirements engineers still understand what is going on. We apply the knowledge and the methods that we have, and we work with that shift left that is going on there in the process. There's more and more that is shifted towards the left, towards the early phases when we automate the back end. And what Kevin has said with, we need to understand the knowledge, we need to understand the data that we are working with, we need to understand the tasks, and then start bringing this together between the humans and the AI and actually understand what we are doing. I would say this is super, super important.
Yeah. Great. Patrick, I think it's so great how you talked about the dilemma between efficiency and effectiveness. There's like one phrase that always sticks in my mind when I think about this dilemma that really captures the essence of that, is to say, if you optimize in the wrong direction, you will get there only, you will get just faster there to the wrong end, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is really something that is super important. It is very easy to work with the systems, and I would say it's also important to work with the systems, to understand what that technology can do for me as a person, for me as someone who is working in a company, but also for my company. And then to distinguish between trying stuff out, doing some prototypes, learning, and actually doing something where I want to achieve the business value. This is probably already the very hard part. So when I'm in the playground and when do I try to actually build a system?
Yeah, Patrick, Stefan, you want to say something?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Patrick, I think this dilemma can be reconciliated with the approach that I've presented with decomposing all of this, all of roles, all of processes into tasks. Because I think a lot of the times efficiency and effectiveness dilemmas are created, for example, if you have different interests from, for example, the management and the worker, right? A management person would be interested, of course, in effectiveness, but to a much higher degree in the efficiency of performing a task than a worker. So you can see here now, this is a potential space for a dilemma. And to get rid of this, we propose that we look into the work of the, let's say, of the worker, and decompose everything to tasks, and then decompose all of the tasks from the management perspective, which could be different, right? And with that, the future requirements engineer would have a basis to renegotiate how these tasks might be performed into this new era with AI support.
If I did understand that correctly, would that also mean that the tasks that you start decomposing are somewhat describing the business, so in terms of the organization, how it's working, but also the business model of that company?
Yeah, so we have a approach where we basically go into the day-to-day life of a individual worker and decompose everything into tasks. So you would have, like, for example, a 4-step task process chain, let's say it like that, that would be then visible. Of course, you can have the same approach with company tasks, right? So of a business area or as a whole, you could definitely decompose the processes there into tasks. And this would create a more unified view on what is happening actually in the company. And then with the right classification system, if you look at each individual task, right, this is the knowledge hierarchy that I brought up. The tasks that are located more on the bottom of the hierarchy are more suitable for AI support than the tasks on the top of the hierarchy, right? So wisdom tasks, like for example, creating a strategy, very hard for AI to do, but classifying some data, very easy for AI to do. And if you then apply this classification system on the task pool, right, you will get a lot of new combinations on, okay, this is how human and AI could work, this is how human and AI could work in this task, and so on and so forth. And from that, you can create new roles, you can create, and then of course there will be like some situations where the management has a different interest than the worker, let's say it like that, or the, let's say the person who's giving the requirements with the one who's executing the requirements, right? But this is the new thing, how to negotiate then, for example, efficiency and effectiveness dilemmas, right? So this to that, I just want to lay out.
If I may join, to me it seems that you are talking a little bit of different things, because Patrick is pretty much advocating for, hey, think about what your goal is and what you really want to build. And you are more, as to say, on the building process. So this is how to use AI efficient and effective to operate and to perform the tasks. But of course, you need to identify the tasks first. So
yes,
to me, this is slightly different. This is one thing. The other thing is, both of you are advocating that you need to think about when and how to use AI, yeah, for what. And what I experience from the field is that people just play around with the thing. This means, if I say play around, I really mean that I think see people say, okay, we ask the AI will help us, and they are not even clear about the goals, what they want to achieve. They just, let's ask the AI. Perhaps the AI has an idea what we want, and now this is a bit, of course, let's say, provocative, what I'm saying. But there's another aspect with the AI where you could use the AI to discuss and elaborate ideas in a discussion with the AI. That you use the AI to brainstorm, because the AI knows pretty much about things you might not ever have heard of, coming along with some crazy stuff you might find interesting. So this is another aspect where you could discuss with the AI and try to elaborate a vision.
Patrick, may I pick up on that? I think
sure.
I can really get a good point here. So Stefan, you are correct in your assessment that there's a slightly different interpretation on the problem. Patrick was concerned with doing the right thing, right? Effectiveness, to really find out what is right to do before you build it. That's my understanding. And he visualized it with a process that is generally more shifted to the left, so to the beginning stages of a process, right? So more tasks are going there. The view that I'm proposing, I think, is not different, but it's expanding on that a little bit. So the knowledge hierarchy that I proposed with the 4 dimensions: data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. The questions about what is the right thing to do would fall under the category wisdom task, right? So it would include that question as well, but it's really a fundamental view to order all sorts of activities in the context of the company into this logic. And of course, it can be one-dimensional at some point in time, but it's a start to look at it. This was the first point that I wanna make.
Mhm.
We're not too far ahead apart from each other.
Yeah, I also think, and I would say when I say think about what is the right thing to do, probably the framework that you propose by thinking about how the tasks come together, this would be one possible method of helping you to understand what is the right thing to do. And so I'm also on the same page and saying I think both of the views fit together in a good way. And Stefan, when you mentioned the use of AI in such a process like brainstorming and thinking about what are the possibilities, this is something that is super interesting, because you could say then we are starting to apply AI in our software engineering process. So we as the humans have been doing this in the past, and we are trying to get more efficient, do this in a faster way or in a better way, whatever, by using AI in our system. And then again, we can try to understand, is this the right thing to do or not? Is this actually creating impact? Is this actually effective or not? And probably we don't have enough data to give a final answer there. There are already some studies that give us hints that brainstorming together with the AI is faster, but it's not as broad as when you do it without. But probably sometimes you also want to be fast and not super broad. So maybe this is okay, depending on the certain task that you are dealing with.
Yeah, I think yeah.
We are then back to what Kevin mentioned, that this is more on the top of the pyramid, yeah. Because brainstorming with the AI means that you need to understand what the AI is proposing, that you need to reflect on it, and that you need to be able to judge whether it makes sense or not, or whether it makes sense to think more about the suggestions of the AI and to dive deeper into it rather than just believing what the AI is telling you. And I think this comes back to a question in the chat, which we had before, that if we move more to the top of the pyramid with the human work, then we need the person who has been calling it the intellect. This means we need to have clever people who understand and who are able to analyze and to draw conclusions and so on and so forth. So this is really a skill people need to have then.
Yeah, I think I can go onto this question in the chat about the intellect. As I've mentioned before, the positive scenario, right, when we don't think about AI will replace us in every dimension of the hierarchy, is that we are pushed to the top of the pyramid, right, to more cognitive, demanding tasks. And of course, there is some sort of truth in that, that tasks on the more upper echelons of the hierarchy could be described as more intellectual, but I wouldn't frame it that simply or just so plainly, because there are a lot of tasks in the data domain that also require some sort of wisdom. So you can see here that this one-dimensional approach on what a task is clearly a wisdom task, or clearly an information task, or clearly a data task. It's not always so easy to do. So you need some wiggle room and some intuition to know what sort of task you can perform. What I would like to say to Stefan in terms of the ideation process and brainstorming with AI, this is exactly what we are basically proposing here with this classification framework. So when you start out with your hierarchy and you know when to put something in the data category or in the wisdom category, or when something requires little experience or a lot of experience, so it's more tacit or more explicit knowledge, you can create an algorithm. You can create a scoring system. So you would have a task like, for example, classifying a data set, and you would then have a system, right, to classify it in the data category and therefore propose AI as a supplement based on some, for example, a score, right? You could ask, for example, about, is this task easy to document, or is a human feedback loop absolutely required? Something like that. But you can algorithmatize these sort of questions and put it, front load it, for example, into a GPT. And then when you interact with the GPT and talk about your tasks, it will help you suggest how your task could be rearranged, right? What is the skeleton of your task set? These are the data tasks, these are the information tasks, these are the knowledge tasks. And based on that, you can get recommendations. Look, these are your data and information tasks, very easily automatable. Here you could look at AI solutions, and this would mean for your role, because as some of your tasks are replaced and you're pushed on the top of the echelon, your remaining tasks, they change, right? And of course, like the commenter said, it could be the case that you require more intellect because you get into more cognitive demanding tasks. Like, for example, you don't have to insert any data to any sort of reporting anymore, but you have now to deal more with the interpretation of multiple dashboards, for example, of a report, right? It's more intellectual than to simply put in data into a model. But this is something that I think we have to deal with. We have to change, we have to adapt. But I believe humanity did this a lot of times, and we can adapt to something like that.
And in your explanation now, in a side comment, you mentioned something that even in the upper tasks, you might use AI as an assistant, as a configured assistant. That you have configured the AI to be able to help you with a certain aspect of sorting out what is a task for AI and what is a task for a human, for example.
Exactly, because for example, if you're like thinking about creating a strategy paper, there are aspects of the tasks which can be supplemented by AI very well. Maybe not questions about ethical implications or moral implications or generally what's right for your industry, but certainly with, for example, a market research, right? So you could have you have to jump around a little bit in the dimensions and decide on how you want to approach this, but you can definitely front load. You need some sort of rules. You need some sort of rules to decide for yourself how you can divide tasks between human and AI.
And I think this is something where the framework that you propose can really be very valuable. And one thing that you mentioned is also something that I feel is super important. When we think about the tasks that we want to automate and the role of AI within these tasks, I think it's very important to make sure that we are talking about the right type of AI, because what is AI in the end, right? We have kind of algorithms, we have machine learning. These are things that are around already for quite a few years. And we have now the more newer things, those transformer models that allow us to interact with very unstructured, semantic rich information, so text in the end, right? And these are quite different things, I would say. Because when we talk about classification tasks and then working with data, this is something where we have those more solid, more older machine learning algorithms that we are dealing with. And when we talk about those with the semantic rich data, everything where we have text within them, this is the area that is new. And this is the actual area that is, I would say, creating that current hype. And you mentioned that example of the strategy report, and I would say there's one important caveat in there. We have access to a certain kind of technology. So there are those models, and we can access those models. Either we pay someone providing us the models like OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever, or we have the hardware in our cellar, and then we put the models on there that are available. But those models are trained with data that is available in the world outside. They're not trained with the data that we have in our company. They might not know much about our business case. And I don't know, if you're doing something like we're creating a social network, this is probably data that is part of the training, that the model knows about that. If we are doing something like creating very specific automotive parts and doing the metal works in there, then this is probably not information that is part of the model. And then we need to supply it in there. And
Yes.
you talked about that. We need to bring that information in there.
Yes.
So we need to maybe bridge in your model from the top to the bottom and make sure that we have like a connection between there.
Yes.
That we have that information that is in the heads of the people, maybe written down, not often, and bring it into the automated system.
Exactly, Patrick. And this is a very key point now, a future scenario. I would be interested in how you envision it. I mean, that's what you described with bringing more context, right? For example, company-specific context. Maybe you need some access to the documents that are there. Maybe you need to provide some other types of documentation. Do you think AI will be able at some point to document enough to really have good output in terms of strategy, for example? Is it even possible to capture all of the knowledge? And I think this is one of the leading questions here, is the tacit knowledge capture, if this is even possible.
Yeah. And so maybe there are two parts of the questions there. So how do I envision that? I really think that if we want to leverage those AI systems, so in that case the LLMs, and try to automate stuff that is using semantic rich information, we need to make sure we get as much in there as possible. But just shoveling it there and saying, okay, this is our now LLM data lake, and we have access to like everything, I don't think this is the right way of doing it. I think we need some really targeted orchestration of that context knowledge to make sure that we actually supply the right information for the right task that we want to automate, just by the way that these systems are working. Shoveling some information in there is not the right thing. If there's conflicting information in there, we are destroying the performance. We need to make sure we bring the right information in there. And this is probably the same challenge that companies are facing like always. So who is writing down the knowledge? And when Horst is leaving the company, are we able to take over his job? Who can do that? The things that only Horst knows. That's the same struggle that we always had. Now it's maybe kind of in a more imminent and more leveraged way, because we want to automate that stuff. It's more prominent there. So that's the one vision where I would say we need to get better at actually writing down our knowledge. And the other thing is, there will probably always be things that we cannot automate or that are very, very hard to automate. And this brings me back maybe to the beginning. Should we then do that? Or are there other things that we might put our effort into that will bring us a bigger business impact? Because probably we can more or less do everything by creating a system, but it will be super, super hard to do that. And then we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Patrick, I totally agree with you. We need a better approach to capture the knowledge that is capturable in a company. And I think a lot of companies, especially as the topic of AI integration is a quite new one. Of course, they were always interested in capturing knowledge, but there were always challenges and it's far from perfect. So I think there's a lot of wiggle room to optimize the approach of capturing more and more knowledge. But I personally think there is a threshold that cannot be broken at some point. Why? Because in my estimation, my opinion, tacit knowledge, experience knowledge, there are certain aspects of that we don't even know why we're doing things right or how we do it. I always think about the case, for example, about speaking, right? I can, of course, describe you perfectly well what a speaking is, how to use language, what is language, and so on and so forth. But I will never fully detail, will be able to transfer you the knowledge on how I move my my throat to speak. I just don't know, right? I can have a technical description, but it won't be until you experience it yourself how to speak and you grow up that you will learn it, right? So there's some sort of experiential knowledge that we just cannot extract from our heads. And this is where I think the point will be where humans are not replaceable, right? Because if there's these aspects, we cannot replace that, right? Up until then, if we can document everything, we can. But at this point, this is where the human, right, on the upper echelons will find refuge, and we will be able to perform tasks that AI maybe not never will be able to do. I'm agnostic on that. But certainly for now and strategies to implement now, it's better to think that there will be, at least in the next year's, tasks that humans will perform always better in.
And sorry if I just jump in, because this addresses perfectly the question, I think, in the chat, where the user is putting a hypothesis, telling that the better AI comes and the closer RE and development come, that in the end he's telling it, it's very elaborate prompting the AI. Okay. Yeah. I would not use the wording, but I get the idea. What I think what is really the essence is that you need to be able to prompt and understand what the AI is giving you, and then you need to analyze the result of the AI, and you need to judge whether this makes sense or not, and whether it's the right direction. And then, sorry to say, but in not too far future, the developers who are coding, they might then be shortcut, because the coding would then be done by the AI. But to judge whether what the AI is creating there, and to decide, this is up to the human still. We know, I can't tell whether this will be the same in the far future, but for the near future, it's still the case.
And I would say I somehow like the elaborative prompting, because when we frame it differently, back in the days, and not my days, people wrote assembler code. And then we started getting other programming languages that added a bit more abstraction on that. So think about stuff like C. Then we thought, okay, maybe C is already pretty hard to write. Maybe we need languages that are even more abstract. And we don't want to care about stuff like pointers and memory management and all these things. And we added more and more and more abstraction layers on top of that. At some point, we even said, okay, we have domain-specific languages that we use to generate code out of these languages already. So we write in a custom-made programming language to generate code out of that. And this is all just giving more and more abstraction layers in there. And if we create systems that are good enough to take a certain kind of specification and turn it into running software, I would say this isn't too much different than what we are doing with writing very high level, high abstract languages today and turning them into running software. And if this is happening or not, and when it's happening, Stefan, I'm with you. I don't know the time, but let's say this is the way that we are going. I would say the role of RE is getting more and more important, because someone has to write those specifications. Someone has to make sure that actually the correct information is in there. And today we have the developers, and they have the tacit knowledge. They know, okay, this is nonsense, or there's that business rule that is not written down, but I know about that thing. If this is not part of the model, and if it's not part of the specification, it's just by chance if you get the right system or not. And this is also where I think it's getting super important that requirements engineering is maybe getting back to its basics, making sure that we really have good specification. Because today, there's a lot of communication going on. When you think about all that agile development, it's all about communication, making sure everybody's understanding everyone. We can interact a lot. If we put AI systems in there that create systems on their own, they don't communicate. We need to make sure that we supply them with the right information.
And there was another user mentioning that he disagrees, and that he says that RE is about what to prompt, meaning specifying the correct prompts in order to reach the target which you have been thinking about before.
Yeah, and I would say a very elaborate prompt is probably one way you understood what you want to prompt. So
Yeah, there's one sentiment that I kind of share, is that the requirements engineer and the dev will converge more and more, right? Will become closer. Maybe RE will take on some development with, for example, solutions that can generate a first code. But I think also here you always have to keep in mind the effectiveness and the efficiency dilemma. It's like one phrase that I picked up somewhere, which was also very telling on this type of situation. You can either create a code and then yourself and debug for 2 hours, or you can create a code with an eye and then debug for 4 hours, what you want to do, right? So this is always a case-by-case situation on where you really want to use that. And it's a very high hypothesis in general to say, oh, the coding will be elaborated prompting, because here, right, like I mentioned in the beginning, this is coming from a very abstract level of idea. I want to automate the coding, right? It's a very abstract solution-based idea. It's not based on the task. The task will be more from the bottom up. You would think about what I'm doing in my daily coding life. You would have all of the tasks, and then each task by its own, you would look where AI would be useful or not. Then you don't run into the problem that you might have an outcome that you have now debug 4 hours instead of debug 2 hours because you did it yourself, and you're in the end more efficient and more effective, right? This is what I'm promoting here, right? This very bottom-up approach. Get rid of the abstractions, get rid of solutions, think only about what you're doing and where it could be useful to use AI or not.
Mm-hmm. And maybe no, I need to phrase it differently. I'm not disagreeing at all with what you're saying. I really think it is super important to understand the small thing, to make sure we get that small thing right, and then we can do the next thing, and then we can do the next thing. So absolutely 100% agreement. I also think if we start doing that like a grassroots movement and doing this in a broad way and having all those little tasks that we are trying to automate, we need to make sure that we are not losing track of the bigger picture. If we just replace all those micro tasks that people are doing by a lot of micro automated tasks, I'm not sure if this is in the long run giving us the big picture. And then this is also bringing us back to the beginning of that session. This might be also part of the learning experience. We need to start somewhere, because if we are waiting until every problem is solved, then all the others will have solved the problems, and they're taking us out of business. This is also something that I think both perspectives come together. We need to solve the question: how do we bring in that knowledge more into the automated processes, but at the same time start automating where we can do that already?
Yeah.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. We need to come to some kind of, I don't know, is there a conclusion? There's an ongoing discussion on what is RE, what is prompting, and what is the best way to do so. I think
I feel like we're kind of starting here, right? So
we cannot touch at all. I think it's quite obvious that we are still in the beginning of the whole journey, and that at the time being we have the situation that the AI is helping in many cases to find, let's say, to brainstorm and other things, but it's not very good in doing strategic decisions and such things, and so perhaps you want to wrap up again as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe also to looking at the chat, Martin said, okay, wording and modeling is just a means to an end, and the end is understanding desires and needs. I would also add, it's maybe about bringing something to the stakeholder that helps him with his desires and needs. And probably this is what RE was always, and maybe will always be. And if we give this to a developer, or we give this to an automated system that is creating then the code in the end, this probably doesn't change too much in the way that we are working with. What is changing is probably the pace, and maybe also the amount of explicit knowledge that we need to put in there. And this is what I want to bring to the table with saying, okay, we need to make sure that we have all that knowledge that Kevin, you said, the tacit knowledge that is in the company, and try to make it more accessible. And this is a long end goal. So this is something that we will not achieve tomorrow, but we need to make sure we start today with that, and then we can get there. But for us as requirements engineers, I think we need to make sure we do what we have ever done, but even in a better way, and be even more systematic and make sure we do it more explicit than ever before.
Yeah, very, very good, Patrick. I think I can agree on that very much. So in my opinion, it's all about not the dilemma effectiveness, efficiency, but if I break down to my perspective, the dilemma between tacit knowledge capture and explicit knowledge capture. I think we found out today it's very important to better our approach in explicit knowledge capture and start there with automating stuff, but really respect tacit knowledge, that this is something that we're not able to extract well, that we need to progress on, and it might be that we'll never be able to extract it because we are unaware of what the tacit knowledge in the full capacity is. So we need to respect that. And just as an action step would be, like I just said, start to automate on tasks that are highly explicit, that are on the lower echelons of the knowledge hierarchy, and respect the upper echelons of the knowledge hierarchy, as this is currently, and maybe a longer time, the human domain, and start to put this both together in a logical way that should produce more output, be more effective, and go from there into the future open-minded, I would say.
Yeah, perfect. I think it's a very good summary. So thanks a lot for this interesting talk. It was really interesting to me, and hopefully to the others out there as well. Kevin and Patrick, please stay with me for a while, and I tried to start the end jingle. I hope this works better than the beginning. Thank you very much for listening, and bye-bye. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks all.